Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Amy Spowert, President and CEO of the National Aeronautical Association. Founded in 1905, the NAA is the oldest national aviation organization in the U.S. We are a 501c3 whose mission is to oversee the advancement of the art, sport, and science of aviation and spaceflight. Our 119-year-old passion is exposing and elevating aviation and encouraging a public understanding of its impact and importance. To learn more about the NAA, please visit our website and know that members of the NAA received advance notice of today's webinar and were able to sign up early for this limited opportunity. This will be the same for future events. Our goal today is to offer insight and comfort to the traveling public. Without further ado, I would like to explain that the history of aviation in terms of all known human existence is relatively short, a blink of an eye. Yet no other technology has allowed humans to do so much and interact so intimately with sky, star, and beyond. Aviation is a field that demands constant evolution. Those who design, build, fly, maintain, oversee, and engage in the art must continually improve. At what point, when you seek perfection, do they call their mission complete? Today, we'll find out. Without further ado, I will introduce our panel. Shelly deZevallos is the president of West Houston Airport. She serves on multiple boards and is a member of the Boeing for Aviation and Aerospace Safety at Embry-Riddle. She's an active pilot and an aviation and airport safety advocate. Aviation and airport safety advocate. She was appointed and served on the United States Department of Transportation Safety and Oversight and Certification Advisory Committee in 2019. And she also volunteers and researches with the National Academy of Sciences Transportation Research Board and sits on the Girl Scout San Jacinto Council Board, one of the largest in the nation. This is the most exciting part, where she just championed the nation's first aviation patch. Becky Lutte is the chair of Graduate Studies, associate professor at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, and a Boeing Center for Aviation and Aerospace Safety Leadership team member. Her research topics include safety policy, sustainability, and online course delivery and design. She has published extensively, been an expert for national news outlets, and testified before the House and Senate on specialized aviation topics. 2019, the Secretary of Transportation appointed Becky to the FAA Women in Aviation Advisory Board, which developed recommendations and strategies for the FAA and Congress to encourage women to pursue careers in aviation. The most remarkable thing about everything I've said so far is that these are shortened bios. And somehow Robert Sumwalt, who's probably one of the most remarkable people in the whole wide world, his bio is even shorter. He's the executive director of the Boeing Center for Aviation and Aerospace Safety at Embry-Riddle, where he serves as the Distinguished Fellow in Aviation Safety. He also serves as an aviation safety analyst for CBS News. Previously, Robert served as NTSB chair for 15 years. Served on the NTSB for 15 years and chair for 4 years. Before that, Robert was an airline pilot for a major airline for 24 years. He's an inductee in the South Carolina Aviation Hall of Fame. Welcome, everyone. I tried to get through that really quickly because, as I said, we tried to shorten all that, but you guys are all so amazing. So let's start setting the stage for our discussion about the reality of aviation safety. For that, we're going to start with Becky Lutte because if it comes to data, there's no one better. Becky, IATA's 2023 report shared that a person must travel by air daily for 103,239 years to experience a fatal accident. Can you expand on IATA's current and long-term data?
Absolutely. First of all, I love that opening data point. It's my go-to safety statistic showing just how safe the industry is. That, of course, came from IATA, which represents 330 airlines around the world. They put out an excellent safety report every year. And from that report, they tell us that 2023 was an exceptionally safe year for aviation. So we had no fatal accidents, no hull losses for jet aircraft for 2023. I do want to recognize we had a turboprop accident in Nepal in that time, but in terms of jet aircraft and fatal accidents for jet, no accidents in 2023. Additionally, they report the trend is good, strong, and the 10-year trend shows improving safety performance. And just, of course, to throw out a few more statistics for you, as an example, from an MIT study, the chance of dying in a plane crash is 1 in 13 million. So by comparison, each year in the US, we have approximately 2.3 million people injured on our roads and highways. This, particularly now in the era of distracted driving, a real issue. So the most dangerous part of your trip, of course, is driving to the airport. So that's your much higher risk of danger. We have more deaths annually by some of the more common things that happen in our world. Driving a car, riding a bike, recreational boating, even food poisoning, higher annual death rates. So that's kind of where we are statistically, but I do want to, start us off by saying we absolutely don't throttle back. We can't be complacent because our safety record is so strong. We will have a record number of passenger enplanements in 2024. And we'll also have all kinds of new entrants, kind of a new golden age of aviation with things like booms, supersonic overture aircraft, eVTOL for urban transport through Joby and Archer. So we have to bring that into the system safely. So safest mode of transportation by far. We've got to keep consistently enhancing that as we move forward.
Fantastic. Thanks for the good news, Becky. Let's go to our first poll question. So how many passengers have safely flown since the last US-based air carrier crash in 2009? Go ahead and it's always exciting to watch. Everyone's thinking everybody's Googling it. Stop Googling it. It's not there. Looks like there's a pause in the action. So let's go ahead and go to Robert for the answer.
Well, hello, and thanks for inviting us to participate in this webinar, Amy. The answer is 11 billion passengers have flown safely since the last fatal airline crash involving a U.S. carrier in this country. 11 billion. So look, 64% got it right.
Did they get an A for the day, Professor?
They absolutely do.
So our aviation system has clearly learned a lot since the last US-based airline crash. What was learned and how did we incorporate it into how we do things now? How have there been no major incidents since then?
Yeah, the February 2009 crash involving an airline called Colgan Air. It was I think many people remember it. It was a turboprop, and it crashed on approach into Buffalo. I consider that to be a watershed accident in that the most significant sweeping changes have come out of that crash in my entire lifetime. For example, the way that pilots are selected, they have to have more flight hours by regulation now than they used to have. They have to have, there's a pilot records database now where potential employers can go in and look at the training records of any pilot that they're about to hire. So the way that pilots are selected has changed. The way that pilots are trained and maintain proficiency. And we have new flight and duty time limit regulations now. There have been sweeping changes since that crash. And I think the safety record reflects the changes that have come into being.
Fantastic, thank you. And Shelly, from a general and business aviation to commercial aviation and military flights, there are many opportunities for failure. Yet so far we're solid. Can you share the volume of flights the US sees daily and how our safety system handles that with little error?
It's really an amazing, amazing system45 that works. We fly over 2.5 million people a day. 45,000 flights a day. And the air traffic system handles these flights at a peak time of 5,400 planes in the system, 500 commercial service airports, a 10,000 private and general aviation airports that we fly out of. But it's not just one factor on the safety. It's not just the pilot responsible for the entire system. It's everybody who brings together something. If you look at the history of flight, it's been great the way we've progressed. We started out being, 100 years ago, 80 years ago, when commercial service became a lot more prominent. We started out with reactive. Now we have turned into a proactive. So it's really fascinating to see all the different aspects that go into SMS, safety management systems. Like I said, it's not just me as a pilot or Becky and Robert, it's everybody that's part of it. And there's redundant systems involved as well.
Wow, thanks, Robert and Shelly. Let's talk a little bit more about what keeps us safe. How does the safety work, and what happens on the flight deck with the entire crew? There is something called, like you mentioned, a redundant system. What is that? Can you share that with us and how it works? Shelly, sorry.
Okay, I wanted to make sure I wasn't stepping on anybody else's toes. First of all, I'm really honored to be here. Thank you for setting this up. I think this is a great program, and I'm really honored to be a part with Robert and Becky as well. So thank you very much. A lot of information here from everybody. Redundant systems means just that. We talk about backup systems in the airplane. You're not just having electrical systems, you have electrical and hydraulics and other systems on the airplane. You have, even in maintenance, you have not just the mechanic, but you have the IA, the person who oversees the mechanic. It's not just a one pilot, you have two pilots. We started out decades ago with 4 people in the airplane. Now our technology's allowed us to have 2 people, but we always have more technology being redundant as well. When you talk about a failure of any mechanical issue, the airplane has another system, and that's what helps keep us safe. Safety management systems aren't just, oh, let's just do this checklist. It's a checklist and somebody else calling out that checklist and making sure they're also there to make sure everything is followed through on that checklist. SMS system isn't just for pilots and the airplane, it's for manufacturing as well. We're working in a system now where everybody in the manufacturing industry of airplanes and certification now have safety management systems as part of their processes. So they make sure they're not making a mistake again. Anybody who feels like something isn't comfortable, isn't right, can make that decision and can say, we're not going to go forward with this process any further. So it's not just airports, it's not just planes, it's not just the pilot, it's everybody that's involved in the process. So that helps us prevent accidents from going forwards, because we now are looking at the system holistically. We're looking at the system in advance, and we're looking at the system instead of just reactive and lessons learned.
I love the notion, and I talk about this a lot, about aviation being an ecosystem, and clearly, in any ecosystem, all the parts have to be working together for the system to be appropriate and adequate, and beyond adequate. Becky, I think it's really fascinating, and for people who don't fly like me, the way pilots interact with one another. Can you talk about how safety works in the flight deck of, commercial flights?
Yeah, absolutely. We talked, Shelly just beautifully talked about SMS and redundancies in the system. That certainly applies on the flight deck as well, right? So we have 2 professional, highly trained, at least 2, depending on the flight, highly trained professional pilots on that flight deck. So when it comes to flight crew safety, it all starts with training. The initial training, the initial getting of the FAA certificates and ratings means that everyone has to meet the same standard, regardless of who you are, in order to earn those certificates and ratings. Then there's that process of building time. And when they get that seat on the flight deck, they are consistently going through scheduled training at the operator. So they're doing routine training in extremely high-tech simulators, not just on procedures, but also, as you were talking about, communication, crew resource management. How do you work as a team, leadership, all of those components. But so they're in those simulators on a very regular basis, doing everything from routine operations to upset recoveries, single engine, system failures, all of those things. So when it comes to safety, it's really about a cycle of training, and also making sure that we're keeping up with making sure that that training is very current to the current operational risk we're seeing in the system that we discovered through SMS. So it's a full circle process.
So Becky, Robert wants to add something. And so I'll go to Robert because maybe he's going to touch on what I was going to ask.
Well, I should not interrupt the lady, but thank you for giving me the floor. You know, I look at it as a system of layers of defense, that we have multiple layers of defense. So if one layer fails, like if a pilot misses something, you're going to have another pilot to back up that pilot. And if both of those pilots miss it, then you might have equipment on an airplane, an alerting system that will alert you as to something. And then finally, another layer of defense could be air traffic control. So there are multiple layers of defense that can trap these errors at any point in the system. And so that's what I like to think of as, that's what I think of when I think of redundancy.
That's fat. I'm going to skip my follow-up question for Becky because you just laid the perfect groundwork for our second poll question. So Tina, if you don't mind throwing it up, and I'll ask Becky my question later. So what is the minimum number of people required to handle a commercial aircraft at gate to takeoff? And I'm very interested to see what people think. And then I know, Robert, you know this question is going to go to you after this. So let's give everybody a minute to take part. All right, let's go ahead and shoot it over to Robert and say, you know, Robert, do you want to tell us the correct answer? And did we miss anybody? You know, I'd like for you to expand more, because I think that comes, the number of people involved in all of this really blows people's mind. I don't think the public at large has any idea.
Well, the way I got through college was you always pick the longest answer. And so that the longest answer was right. But there were other people that I thought were perhaps missing. I was an airline captain for, oh, look, let's see those results again. Look how smart this audience is. But anyway, see, that's how they got through college also. But you know, a couple of people that I saw that were not included. As an airline pilot, which I was for 24 years, and the captain for, gosh, over 20 years, I would always have to sign a dispatch release. So behind every pilot is a good dispatcher. And so this is a person that you've probably never met. They're in an operation control center at the you know, the airline's headquarters, and they are checking the weather. They're figuring your fuel load. They're figuring the loading of the aircraft, the routing, and all of those things. And by regulation, there has to be agreement between the pilot, the captain, and the dispatcher before you can fly. And that's why I would literally sign the release saying that I agree and I accept the responsibility for the flight. So I think a dispatcher, definitely you're required to have that in an airline environment. And also, I always like to have fuel on the airplane. And I noticed there was not a fueler in there. So there's a lot of frontline employees, most of which you mentioned, but a few others there that I wanted to add. And of course, behind all of those are the people back at headquarters that are paying the bills and ordering more fuel to fill up those fuel trucks and to schedule pilots and flight attendants. So there's a lot that takes, a lot that is involved in getting one airplane off the ground safely.
So I would like to hear from all of you, a little bit off script, but I would love to hear from each of you. Who in your experience at you know, we know Shelly owns an airport, so she has, you know, intimate knowledge. Robert, of course, NTSB chair. Becky's a very active pilot as well. You know, who are the people at the airport or in the aircraft, or, you know, that don't get the recognition, that the public just doesn't understand that these people are so important and nobody knows about them? I mean, I know there's a lot, but who are the unsung heroes? Robert, go ahead and go first.
No, I'm going to defer to Shelly. I've spoken enough, and you know, I completely missed the wonderful people that work at the airport. So Shelly?
No, you got it. Thank you. You call them the unsung heroes in some ways. You know, the pilot gets the blame and the gain. We think we're the coolest people, but in reality, it is everybody who makes that airplane operate and work. Everything from the line crew guys bringing you in, making sure you're safe, you're not hitting another airplane or another person. That has happened once in a while. You know, not on our airport, but in other facilities, people may not be familiar when they're flying in. You have the fueler, the person driving the truck. You have the baggage claim handlers, because you want to make sure you're not damaging the airplane. And I talk about that in a little way, but they also, each one of these folks, guys and gals, also make sure there's not, that they don't see something unusual with this airplane, because they report issues. They report issues as well. There may not be trained pilots, but they see when something's not right. So each one of those folks are kind of the unsung heroes that has an extra set of eyes for everything. And that's just the staff that's on the ground. That doesn't include the folks who are fueling as well and bringing in the right gas, avgas, jet fuel, et cetera, and making sure that the airplane is maintained. Mechanics sometimes don't get the recognition they're due. And each one of them puts their heart and soul into making sure that airplane flies correctly and flies right. So, I mean, I could talk for a long time about airport personnel, and something as simple as, you know, in our airport, we're one of the busiest general aviation airports across the country, but organizations like the National Business Aviation Association and EAA, Experimental Aircraft Association, make it their part of their processes that they provide training and seminars and programming for people who are schedulers and dispatchers, for line crew, for maintenance. So for a lot of different aspects, we are focused on safety, not just when we're in there, but organizations outside of the industry who are making this their priority and have made it their priority for, you know, the decades that they've been around. So it's not just the personnel who are actually there, it's the folks and organizations that are outside that make it a point to train people correctly and to bring in awareness to everybody else as well.
I love that. I also never heard of the pilot gets the blame, or the what did you say, game and blame? That was funny.
The pilots get the blame and the gain, you know, GAIN, you know, so we're the cool folks, you know, but in reality, it's everybody that keeps that airplane flying.
That's right. That's right. Becky, who are the unsung heroes?
I mean, first of all, thanks, Shelly. Totally the cool folks. That's what we stick with, right? Absolutely. Flight attendants. You can't not talk about flight attendants when it comes to system safety, right? I mean, that is their primary purpose for being on the airplane. They work in coordination with the flight team, the flight pilots of the aircraft. They get briefed ahead of time. They all work together as a team. They communicate, and their job is to get you off that airplane when they have an evacuation. So it's an extremely important job. I have to put in a plug that's a two-way street. And so safety is in part also due to the proactive role of the passenger that they have to play in terms of listen to the briefing. Every time I sit on an airplane, I've done it several times in the last 2 weeks, and that briefing comes up, I turn to see how close the exit is behind me and in front of me every single time. Wear the darn seatbelt all the time. And last, I was in the airport and I saw this woman walking through with these awesome heels. And my first thought was, those are great shoes. I mean, how cool are those shoes? And my second thought was, you got to get out of the airplane. That's not what you want to have on your feet. So total call out to the flight attendants and the great work they do. But we as passengers also need to play our role in being ready to help them and get out of the airplane as needed.
Absolutely. I mean, I always think of the flight attendants as safety professionals. I always think that, and we think about when there are mishaps, and we're about to get into that section of this webinar today, where we're going to talk about media hype and things that are actually happening. And I think about the fact that passengers have the ability to put their seatbelt on, but if you're a flight attendant and you're in an aircraft and you're at service, or you're doing something, you're taking care of somebody, or you're doing something for the pilot, whatever, that they can't wear their seatbelts, and they're at risk all the time, and it's not an option for them. We have the option to put our seatbelts on. So thank you. Robert, did you want to add anything to follow? Okay, you're good. Okay, let's go ahead and throw up that third poll question. According to a recent report by A4A, what percentage of Americans are happy with air travel? I think people are cheating. Everyone gets all the answers right. Okay. Now we're seeing it mixed up a little bit. All right. So the answer, and nobody picked 90%. I guess that's kind of a good job. Because the correct answer is, oh, I guess we'll throw it up. The correct answer is, it's actually 71%. But if you said 70, we'll give it to you. And Mr. Sumwalt is going to continue giving people A's for the day. So, so 71% of people are happy, right? That they're good with air travel. Yet the media hype, everything that we're seeing in the media every single day right now is contradicting that notion. And I just wanted to share a short story, and I'm hoping that you all can share similar stories as well. But I was on a flight. It was right near the end of COVID. I remember this very well because of what happened and because I had a mask on. But as soon as we took off, I fly a lot for work, and I could tell right away, like, we're heading toward 10,000 feet because we're all listening so we can get our computer out. And we leveled off at 5,000, and I thought, okay, well, maybe this is a different aircraft. And I waited for them to level at 5,000 and go back up, and it just wasn't happening. And I noticed we started to turn, and then I heard the ding, ding. I travel enough to know that that ding isn't supposed to happen right then. And then the flight attendant didn't answer right away. That went ding, ding, and the pilot said, "Flight attendant, pick up the phone now." So flight attendant picks it up. Captain then comes on after he speaks to that person and, and says, he explains that there's something wrong with the aircraft, that we have to turn around, and that it's very likely that our landing will be hard. And that's all he said. And we're all sitting there like good little soldiers. And I do what I do. And I stare at the flight attendant. And she was great. She just sat down and put on her seatbelt. So I'm like, I'm just going to stare at her. And everybody was just like, we're all a little bit nervous, moving around a little bit, but we have our seatbelts on. And he was like, the flight attendant is going to show you what crash positions are. And I'm like, okay, things just got real. So she showed us, then she sat down, and then we circled around to burn off some fuel. We didn't really know. We just knew that our crew was busy taking care of us. And obviously I'm sitting here today. We landed hard, we landed using crash positions. But the outstanding thing for me was that the communication from the pilot, the reaction and actions, the flight attendant, everything was so surreal, and I felt okay. And we all got off the plane. We all stayed in one area, that we received lunch or something while we waited for a new aircraft. And then we just went and carried on with our journey. Everything was fine. My sense is this happens a lot. My sense is, not a lot, but I mean, it happens enough that these safety professionals know how to react. That isn't what we're hearing this isn't what we're hearing in the media. Becky, there's been so much hype. The data doesn't lie, right? Airline travel is safe. We should feel comfortable flying. Can you share any personal experience and any thoughts about this? What's going on, Becky?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm in the same, line of thought as you are. There are headlines I read that I just cringe. Is it safe to fly, or yet another, or some kind of a headline like that. And absolutely, things like Alaska 1282, that's got to be reported. We need to learn. We need to know, where those fault points are and how to fix them. But I feel like lately we're certainly seeing things reported in the news that haven't really been reported in the past. So, and an example, kind of like you just said in terms of a personal experience, I had, I think it's 2020, going from Houston to Munich. And we are getting ready to coast out, as we say, over the pond and head over to Europe. And same kind of a thing with watching the flight attendant actions. I was very aware that something unusual is happening. And then we had this outstanding PA from the captain of the flight who came on and was transparent and clear and stated that we've lost a hydraulic system and that this is not an imminent threat. We have backup redundant systems. But out of an abundance of caution, we are not going to coast out. We're going to go to New York. We're going to swap out airplanes. We're going to get you on your way. And that's exactly what happened. It was uneventful, as we say, which is what we like to have in aviation. And it did not get reported in the news. But not long ago, I'm looking at one of those stories and it said, this major airline had 8 safety incidents in this relatively short time frame. And when you look deep on that list, 2 of them were hydraulic issues, right? Where they just came back and landed and addressed it. So I think really what those issues show us is that we have redundant systems in the airplane. We have safety management systems throughout the operations. We have 2 highly trained professional pilots on board. So to me, a lot of what we're seeing in the media is examples of what we're doing right and examples of the fact that the system works because it's resulting in uneventful landings in the end.
Shelly, my next question is for Robert, but I'd like to give you the opportunity. Do you have anything that you would like to share along these lines, like any experiences you've had, and anything you'd like to say about it?
Yes, I'm a pilot. I can talk about anything. So since you're there, Becky hit the nail on the head. And, one of the things that's happening now is we require in our world a 24-hour media cycle. So what has happened, because we've had an amazingly safe system for so many years, is that now people are looking for things that aren't safe. So it's a news seller and a news source. I almost lost a landing gear when I was flying my plane decades ago. Wouldn't make the news, but now it would make the news nowadays. We have safety systems back. We have issues that are, when you're not familiar with how the airspace system works and you're not familiar with how the airplane works or what the pilots do and flight crew does, it's a level of excitement for people who don't understand that flight and the challenges, but the blessings that those flights have for all of us around the world. So when something is unusual or new to somebody, it sells clicks or it sells papers. Used to sell papers, now it just sells clicks, sorry. But so you do have a 24-hour news cycle, and these airplanes are safe. And I'm going to reiterate what I said, over the past 80 years of commercial flight, we were reactive decades ago. Policies and procedures were put in place back when accidents happened. But now we have SMS, safety management systems, and programs and policies before something happens. And a lot of that, I'm going to give credit to Robert Sumwalt because of some of the things that he did at the NTSB and other organizations around the globe. But so we now look and we see and we prevent instead of react. So, a landing gear failure or an issue that happened with you or Becky will get reported nowadays because everybody has their cell phone too. So they can show that on a YouTube or show that on a news clip and be able to get a little bit more excitement.
And I'm going to come back and ask you a little bit more about SMS in a second, but I mean, just crazy. I mean, Robert, is the public confused? I mean, what's going on? How can we explain to people, or how would you please explain to people the maintenance of a Boeing or Airbus aircraft once it leaves manufacturing? I mean, can you talk about, that initial responsibility and then the ongoing responsibility? Can you just explain it to the public at large?
Yeah, well, certainly the airlines have a legal responsibility to ensure that their airplanes are airworthy. And they do that by a number of means. There's a continuous airworthiness program that there's a daily check, and an A check, and a B check, and a C check, and a D check. Obviously, the overnight check is routine walking around the airplane by a licensed maintenance technician that's basically checking the tire pressure and the oil and the engines and the hydraulic fluid and things like that. But periodically there's an A check, which is a more detailed inspection, and then a B check and a C check, and C check is about every 2 years, and then finally a D check is where they completely disassemble the airplane and put it back together. So it's a continuous airworthiness program whereby certain components have to be looked at periodically at various cycles, and it generally works pretty well. I will say that that Boeing has has certainly gotten a lot of heat. By the way, our center is the Boeing Center for Aviation and Aerospace Safety. I work for Embry-Riddle, Aeronautical University. The center is named for Boeing because of a contribution they made. But Boeing has been getting a tough time. I mean, a tire fell off of an airplane several weeks ago. And, they said another Boeing problem. Well, that airplane was operated by an airline for 28 years. So is that Boeing's issue or is that the airline's issue? And so, I think that it doesn't matter to the consumer whether it's Boeing's problem or whether it's the airline's issue. The point is, it gets reported in the news and it makes people uncomfortable. But I can't emphasize enough that our system does work very well. As someone said, these events that are happening are unacceptable. But again, there's that redundancy that is allowing the pilots to be able to land the airplane, get it back on the ground safely. In the case of the wheel falling off of that airplane, it was a Boeing 777. There happened to be 5 other wheels on that very strut of the airplane. And so, probably was not a big deal, but it certainly made the news.
Robert, you just ruined one of my cool airport tricks. Like I love 777s because because you could always identify like an L1011 or a 747. Those were easy. But nowadays, as we say, it's a little bit harder. But I know that if I see those 6 tires, I know, but other people don't know. So that's one of my parlor tricks. Hey, look at that nice 777 over there.
This one has no wheels, I guess, but
okay, so just a follow-up question then, just out of curiosity. So all 5 other wheels would work?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Huh.
6 wheels on that landing gear, 6 on the other, and then 2 on the nose gear. So the pilots could come in and make a landing. In that particular case, it departed San Francisco. They chose to go to LA and land at LAX, and basically a normal landing.
Okay, so our next conversation, Robert, will be, you'll have to tell me how I can identify other aircraft since I now lost my only trick. Now I'll have to go to the airport and be just like or I'll just have to figure out how to tell airplanes apart. I don't know. But Shelly, I would love to go back to you and talk a little bit more about SMS because, we're talking about airport safety, airline safety, manufacturer safety. And I think it was Becky who mentioned, or maybe it was you, Shelly, I'm sorry, and I did not know this, that maintenance folks are now part of the SMS process. So could you tell everyone what SMS is and how it works?
Yes, and kind of, I feel like I shouldn't be the one talking about SMS. I don't know if you know, but Robert Sumwalt has a book out about safety management systems. So I know whatever I say is just he's going to have a little bit more succinct answers than I do. But I also wanted to touch on something he just said as well, and about SMS. And we hadn't talked about it. We talked about it a little bit. Was the pilots that are trained to land that 777 when that tire blew out. And first of all, the 6 tires on each side is also another example of redundancy and safety and backup plans. But the pilots that have, these pilots aren't just trained once, and you don't just meet the 1,500-hour requirements and then get up on the plane. They have constantly training. They go into the sims. They do a lot of training under SMS guidance, under other people's guidance. And these are the best people in the entire world flying these airplanes. Every 6 months, they get medicals, they get training, they get sim training. They are proficient. They understand the issues and challenges that can happen. And I give that to the pilots as well as the flight attendants as well. I just wanted to emphasize that because these are amazing people. Going back to SMS, and like I said, Robert, you're going to be able to answer a little bit more succinctly than I am, but safety management systems, as Robert said in the beginning, is a layered approach. It's not so one thing happens and you can't catch it and it misses. But what happens is that you have more and more people involved and overseeing and programs and systems in place that, focus on the policy, the risk management, the assurance and the promotion. There's 4 tiers of safety management system. And it's not just one size fits all. It's everybody coming together in every aspects of manufacturing and maintenance that helps keep it safe. I was trying to think what we were talking about yesterday before this call when we, how I put it, it was a little bit better than what I'm saying right now, but it was everybody coming together and making sure nothing gets through those nets, and bringing every aspect of safety to the helm. So anybody has the ability to say, now, wait a second, let's think about this aspect and make sure that's put in place.
Thank you, Shelly. Robert, what would you like to add?
Well, I think Shelley's given me way too much credit. I was one of 3 who wrote a book on SMS. Incidentally, we just got back from China on Sunday. Well, 2 of us went to China and taught SMS to 10 cargo carriers. So that was a great trip. I look at SMS as a business approach to managing safety. Organizations really take care of those things that are important to them. And for most organizations, finances are important. And so what do? They have a chief financial officer, and they audit with general accepted accounting practices, and they have internal audits and external audits and all types of accounting rules that they follow. And why do they do that? Because finances are important to that company. So what SMS does, it gives a business approach to manage safety. A certain toolbox that has all types of things in it that you use to manage safety, just as you manage the other things that the organization values. So that's the way I look at it. And I think the heart of it is the risk management aspect, where organizations, anytime they change something, anytime they introduce a new procedure, anytime they go into a new airport, they do a risk assessment to say, what are the things here that can hurt us? Okay, those are the hazards. We've identified the hazards. Now let's assess the level of risk associated with it. And if the risk is too high, if it's unacceptable, then they control the risk by putting in place measures to lower the risk. So I think that's as I said last week in China, I think that the risk management aspect, that's the soul of the safety management system.
Told you it's very well said.
Thank you.
So, I mean, just to sit on this for a minute, because as part of the Women in Aviation Advisory Board that Becky and I sat on for the FAA, we had a whole part, maybe a page on SMS, which is a lot more than other parts got, delegated to. And I found SMS enlightening and invaluable and reassuring as somebody, again, who's not a aviation professional. I think it's very reassuring that it exists. We know that there are, a couple areas where we could see improvement, in SMS, but what Robert is the most remarkable thing about SMS, and why does it work? For me, as somebody who's not a professional.
Well, it's a great question. I think it works because the FAA has required all of the airlines to implement it, and they're just in the process now of over the next 3 years that all charter companies will be required to do it. All aircraft manufacturing and equipment OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, are going to have to employ the tools of SMS. I think it's successful because it's helped to create a culture where people feel free to report safety issues. And some people might say, oh, we've got a lot of incident reports. That's bad. I look at having a lot of incident reports as good, because those things were happening before. Now you're knowing about them, so you know where your problems are. So SMS has been very effective. It's been in place for the U.S. carriers now since 2015, and I think it works very well.
Awesome. Well, clearly, and it's counterintuitive, but we want to see lots of reports, right? I mean, that's how we improve.
You're exactly right. Yeah, and by the way, I'll just add this and then I'll be quiet, but somebody that worked at the FAA told me, Robert, I think we ought to change the name from Safety Management Systems to just Safety Management. And I think he's got a good point. I like the active sense of safety management. That's what we're doing. We're managing safety.
And am I remembering correctly that the aviation's estimate, and I'm probably completely wrong, but I have this idea that when I was learning about it, as part of the board, that came as a result of from NASA, correct? It came from, is this the safety, Becky, am I completely off? Is this the thing that came from the report from the Challenger disaster?
I defer to Robert on the historical perspective a little bit more, but without a doubt, NASA and the history of NASA plays a role in SMS development. And you're
Okay.
right, from some of the incidents that have happened at NASA, you're spot on. Yeah. Anything else on that I missed, Robert?
No, I'm going with your
Wrote the book on it.
Oh, Robert's like, well, actually, but so, Becky, let's take it back to data for a second.
Always happy to go back to data.
Yeah, of course. How does understanding the data and analyzing the trends that come into play from what we've learned from those reports, how are they being used? You know, from what Shelly said to what Robert said, how is that making aviation safer?
Yeah, well, what you just described, actually, pulling data and analyzing data is an absolutely foundational cornerstone piece of SMS. So it's foundational to SMS. It allows us to be proactive in identifying risk and safety. And so I just kind of want to briefly give 3 examples for those that might not be familiar with some of the data pulling that we do in aviation. All 3 of these, by the way, Robert, again, has been actively involved in the development and championing and making sure these programs are expanded through his work in the industry and NTSB. So the 3 I want to mention are FOQA, LOSA, and voluntary reporting. So lots of acronyms I know in aviation. Some of these might be new to some. So FOQA, Flight Operations Quality Assurance, is literally pulling data from the plane. So we have data recorders that are onboard aircraft that are capturing, in some cases, hundreds of parameters, pitch, roll, bank, altitude, hundreds of parameters throughout that entire flight. And think about that, for every flight in the system, 24 hours. That is a massive amount of data. And what that allows us to do is pull that data and look for anything that's out of the ordinary, any abnormals. When we grab those abnormals, now we can start looking for trends. When we identify trends, system safety, we can feed that back into, do we need to change anything we're doing in the sims, in the training environment? Do we need to change anything in SOPs, standard operating procedures, regulations? So massive amounts of data. So by the way, data analyst, outstanding job opportunity in aviation. So I throw that out there. The second is LOSA, Line Operations Safety Assessment. So again, gathering data, a very different perspective. You have peers observing peers in normal operations. So for example, you would have a line pilot sitting on the jump seat of a standard flight, passengers in the back. That line pilot in the jump seat is a trained observer for the LOSA program, has a standardized procedure that he or she follows and a form they fill out that is observing what's going on in that flight deck to look for potentially any errors, any threats, any risks that they're seeing. And again, all that data gets pulled. And the same thing, we're looking for abnormals, we're looking for trends. And then the last one is, as Robert was mentioning, the voluntary reporting systems. Key, a very key element in SMS. We have to be willing to share when I've made an error, when I've seen an error, when I've seen risk in the system. Pilots, maintenance personnel, air traffic controllers, this is very much those that are on the front lines, you know, boots on the ground, if you will, of the operations. But anybody in the system can do this. But reporting those things in a narrative form, and that all gets captured and analyzed, again, for trends in the system. So 3 really key ways that we gather data in very different qualitative, quantitative types of data gathering. But one underlying key, it's proactive. It helps us identify things before they turn into incidents and accidents. And as Robert and Shelly both said, I know it absolutely requires a culture of trust. So these are non-identified, non-punitive. You know, I have to be very comfortable that I can report these things out. And that requires leadership, that requires the work of unions like Airline Pilots Association, National Air Traffic Controllers Association, to buy in and help support the system. But this is well established, especially on the flight side, and has really helped us, again, proactively, and now even with AI and machine learning, predictively improve safety performance for the industry.
Wow, thanks, Becky. That I feel safer already.
Good, you should.
Yeah, I do. I do. Shelly, I'm just going to ask you a quick follow-up question regarding what Robert and Becky just shared. Is there anything unique about how SMS is employed at the airport?
We have a small airport. We're not a commercial service airport, but every system, and I like the way Robert said and Becky says, it's about a business model. Every time, for example, and I'm going to use fueling an airplane. Every time we fuel an airplane, there's not just one piece of paperwork or just one number on the truck. We follow through with the number on the truck. We follow through with making sure everything is in sequence. We're not losing a gallon any place. So we know how much fuel is put into an airplane every time we fuel an airplane. We also know who signed off for it, who's the manager of the system, and who inputted that into our data system, data or financial systems to bill it. So it's not just one person. 3 to 4 people touch that same ticket, touch that same process and procedures to make sure that that pilot got what he wanted and needed. That's just one example. And safety is a risk management, and safety management systems are risk management. If you sit at home and don't do anything and become a couch potato, you have the risk of becoming, maybe heart disease. So there's always a risk in everything you do. So you have to understand that we mitigate that with not just one person or one technology, but implementing all facets of a lot of different things. And what's nice about the way the world is going right now, you look at folks like Joby Aviation and Eva and Ilium, and these folks are already putting these safety management systems in their new electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft.
Wow, thank you. Now I wish we had Trish Gilbert on here as well, and we could have talked about the tower. Bummer. That would have been a great addition. Sorry, Trish, that would have been awesome. Robert, you're clearly in your office. I see this awesome sign behind you. You are the executive director of the Boeing Center for Aviation and Aerospace Safety. That's pretty awesome. What distinguishes this from your previous gigs? And tell us a bit about the Boeing Center and why it's so special.
Well, I think we really are a very special place. We are focused exclusively on safety. We're really looking at 4 different things. We are working on conducting impactful safety research. We are conducting professional education. By that, if somebody wants to come and take a 5-day class on accident investigation, or developing a safety management system, or like 2 of us traveling to China last week to teach an SMS class. So we've got that element that we're doing. We also support our academic programs here at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. We've got about 32,000 students across the entire system. About 8,000 here at Daytona Beach, about 3,500, 3,200 at Prescott, Arizona, and about 22,000 in our worldwide program where Becky is one of the senior leaders. And so we've got resources that we are supporting those programs. We do that, and we also do some consulting. If an airline needs some help with something, we've got the expertise that we can come in and help. We've got 1,300 faculty members who are very talented in their respective fields. We can draw from those faculty members to put together a package to be able to fit the needs of an organization. So it's a lot of fun being here. The center is just over 2 years old. I retired from the NTSB and was invited to come and start this center. So we've got a lot of runway ahead of us, and a lot of great people like Becky, who is on our leadership team. Shelly is on our industry advisory board. We're very fortunate to have a lot of people that are supporting us.
That's phenomenal. And just to clarify, while it's named the Boeing Center, you're inclusive. Words are hard. I shouldn't be doing this. Words are hard. Inclusive of all of aviation and all OEMs and everyone, correct?
Absolutely. I don't know if you can see it, but on the top of the banner, it says improving safety for all who fly. And that the president of the university came up with that tagline because we're not just about airliners. We're not just airlines. We're not just about Boeing. We are here to help improve safety for all who fly, regardless of who they are or what they are manufacturing. And general aviation, which Shelly and Becky are both very involved in general aviation. General aviation, by the way, is everything that flies except for the military or the airlines. So it goes anywhere from hot air balloons all the way up to corporate jets and everything in between. General aviation, we are working on some initiatives there as well. So it's a lot of fun to be here and continuing the passion that we all share for improving safety.
Thank you, Robert. That's fabulous. I'm going to do something crazy with only 5 minutes left and ask Tina to go ahead and throw up our fourth poll question. We may move through this pretty quick, but this is fun stuff. Looking again at the A4A report, what's the most common way Americans book their leisure travel? And I think the answer is a little bit surprising. Let's see what people have to say. I'm going to go ahead and tell the answer just because we're running short on time. Tina, if you want to share the answer, otherwise I'll just say it. It is airline websites. That's how, let me see. I didn't write down the percentage, but it's overwhelmingly airline websites. So thanks for that, Tina. Shelly, are you surprised that people are booking on airline websites? The report also shared that half the population flew in 2023. That feels surprising to me because of all the media hype. Anything you'd like to share? Are you surprised?
I think it's easier to use a website than it is the phone to search and get those the best deals on the website. So I'm not as surprised. I'm surprised about how the differential between 30 and 60, I'm surprised at how many more, but I'm not surprised that half of the population flies. It's an easy, safe way and affordable at this point to get from point A to point B. I mean, you want to drive, 17 hours from Houston to Kentucky, or you want to fly 2.5 hours. I mean, it's a time value of money too. I mean, for $400 to $500 round trip and I did that because I just did this trip from Houston to Lexington and back. It's really a good deal and it's safer. Two great aspects.
Yeah, fabulous. Becky, you have commercial pilots in your life. Do you feel, and I don't want to end like this. You have 2 commercial airlines pilots in your life. Are you worried about their safety? What can you share about that? I'm going to change the question a little bit.
No, that's fine. No, absolutely not. I'm very, very comfortable with the level of safety in the industry and for them. And really, the role of the pilot, as we've been in the industry for a while, really fundamentally hasn't changed. So we have new automation and innovation and technology, but you know what? It's about doing the job, being professional, sitting in the seat, following standard operating procedures, no matter who it is in the seat. That part of it is really kind of the same. So I think, I will say this, though, in terms of how it's changed a little bit over time. I think now more than ever, because of SMS and the programs that we've talked about, pilots have the opportunity, and everybody in the system, but you asked about pilots, but pilots have a much greater opportunity to actively play a role in safety enhancement through reporting, through identifying risks, and some of the programs that we talked about. So I think if anything, it's become, of course, safer. We know that. The technology is safer, the systems are safer, the opportunities to make the system even better exist. So one of my most fun days is riding along with either one of the number of pilots in my family or flying them, either way. And from the GA side to the commercial flight side, we're in the air all the time. Get out there and go fly. It's all good.
Right on. Wow, that's good, Robert. You're going to have a hard time closing this show down after that. But hey, I want to know if you, as former NTSB chair, should we feel safe flying? And I also want to know, as a follow-up, is being a commercial airline pilot boring? Because I think there's got to be a lot of waiting around. So two very disconnected questions for you. Maybe answer the boring one first and then the flying one.
I loved being an airline pilot. I loved flying airplanes. And so for me, it was not boring at all. What greater thing to do is do something that you love doing and get paid for it. So, people want to be airline pilots. So the airlines are having trouble firing. Well, that's not even, hiring pilots because there's a pilot shortage. And so we're trying to pump more people into the pipeline. Regarding flying safe, is flying safe? Well, I think we've talked about that. I think you would have to board an airplane, one airplane a day at random for the next 103,000 years before, statistically speaking, you'd be killed in an airplane, in a commercial airline. I think that figure is pretty compelling. I just got off of coming back from China, Hong Kong, and 15 hours from 8 hours to Dubai and another 15 hours to Orlando. I don't want to get on an airplane for 103,000 years. But I will get on one tomorrow. I'll get on one tomorrow. So anyway.
It's so true though. I don't know about you all, but I'm always like, I don't want to fly anymore. I just want to stay at home until tomorrow whenever I get on a plane. It's always that way, right? But flying's awesome. You guys have been great. I can't thank you enough. This has been super duper fun. And I, as somebody who doesn't fly aircraft, you've expanded my mind so much, shared really useful information, and I'm so very, very grateful. So thank you all. And Robert, did you want to say something? Nope.
Just
Becky.
Goodbye. Thank you so
Look
much.
forward to seeing everybody on their next airline trip.
That's right.
Hey, Shelly.
Thanks for highlighting the topic for sure. So grateful, Amy.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.